Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to my channel, The Wealthy Sailor. I am John, like always, and today we're going to go over something that's kind of been bothering me for a couple months now, but I didn't really want to go over it, or at least I didn't know if I had the nuances down to be able to go over it without sounding kind of tone deaf. So, given the fact that it's a little bit after COVID-19 and things are sort of, I don't want to say over, but at least more predictable because we've already had a trend. I want to go over what it was like to be a landlord during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, I know what you're thinking. Most people have very little sympathy for landlords, and why should you? We own the property. The only time you hear from landlords is when your rent's due or when something's broken and you're trying to get us to fix it because we won't get off our lazy butts and fix anything. There are a lot of things about landlords during this whole thing that I think have been overlooked because there's been so many bad landlords out there that it's hard to feel bad for things that all of them do because some, or I would say even a lot, have done some pretty stupid things, like the guy who used his renter's information from their renter's application, like their social security number, their name, their address, to check with the IRS to see if they got their stimulus check just so he can send them a text message asking them if they're going to pay their overdue rent because they know they got their stimulus check, which, by the way, is only against like 3 or 4 federal laws, so not a huge deal. And to be honest, even if that wasn't against any federal laws, that is still very immoral. I mean, like, just anybody who knows anything about finances, which I assume that a lot of property owners know at least a little bit about finance because they were able to save or at least do enough to be able to own something. So you would think somebody with enough experience would realize that if that person's not paying the rent, they probably have no income, which means that money probably needs to go for things like food. Furthermore, it's even harder to feel bad because in a lot of cases, landowners like myself could apply for a deferment. Every bank I've heard of, like I know several people that own multiple rental properties, and all of our banks were allowing us to apply for a deferment even before the federal bill was passed that made it a requirement. Before that, because banks don't want you to default on your mortgage either. So they want you to be able to pay, so they're going to do what they can to do it. And to be completely honest with you, a deferment actually kind of helps out the bank a little bit because all it really does is add that same amount of payments to the end of your loan. So they're not even losing out on money. All they're doing is kind of waiting 3 to 6 extra months to get it, which kind of extends their investment in you. So it works out for them. All right, let me take a moment here and explain what a deferment is in case you don't know. A deferment is basically your payments basically freeze in time and then shift to the right. So let's say it's January. You might not have to make a payment for your mortgage until July. So you get 6 months of no payments. And you don't have to pay interest for that. There's no penalties for it if you apply and then consequently receive the deferment. But all it does is it just shifts those payments to whenever your loan was supposed to be finished. So let's say your loan was supposed to finish up in December, then now it won't finish up until July because you're going to just move those 6 months of payments to the end. It's actually not the worst system to do, and you do have to apply for it. It's not like you just call your bank and be like, oh, I need a deferment. It's sort of like applying for a personal loan, like the same amount of steps. It's usually only like maybe a page of questionnaires. And then if you're in good standing with your bank, they pretty much approve you right away. So the reason that the pandemic was a little different with landlords is that I think a lot of people fail to realize that most landlords don't have their property paid off that you're living in. Most of them lived in the property, then moved and decided to rent out, which means that they're probably, if they're making any money at all, it's a couple $100s. And if you think about the fact that, let's say they go through tenants every 2 years, they have to make whatever profit that they made off of you, hold them over for the month or 2 months process that's going to be vacant for. Additionally, they need to pay for repairs and stuff like that. Like, it's not just because somebody's your landlord doesn't mean that they are making a ton of money off of you. So I think it's important to understand where some of them are coming from, providing they're not being complete jerks about it. So I guess you're wondering, why should you put yourself in the landlord's position if they can just ask for a deferment? Well, because there's a couple things that happened during the pandemic that isn't just paying the mortgage. what some people don't realize is that a lot of moving stopped, which means any landlord, like a couple of friends of mine who had empty properties at the time, they now just went 5 months with an empty property. Now that's fine. You can ask for a deferment, providing that you haven't used up the deferment from something else. Like for example, one of my friends, literally, the deferment ended because he was on a deferment because this place was empty, right? So he came off the deferment after the pandemic started, and they wouldn't extend it for him. And because COVID-19 started, he also couldn't get anybody into the place to rent. So that was a very tough time for him because now he has this property that he was underwater on, which is the only reason he kept it. He unfortunately he bought it years and years and years ago when property values were really high, and he's still underwater on it. Now there are some financial things, mistakes that went into this situation, but I did feel bad for him because obviously it was something he didn't prepare for, and honestly none of us really saw the pandemic coming before it actually happened. The other thing is, and a lot of people don't realize this, you can only qualify for a deferment if you're in good standing with your mortgage. So if you were late or default at all, you couldn't just ask for deferment. So that kind of made it harder for some other people. And again, it's not that the pandemic caused it, but definitely made an already bad situation significantly worse. Now, personally, I've been pretty lucky because I only have one property being rented right now that I control, and it has a renter in it who works for the military. I bought a house in a military town because I was in the military at the time, and now it's been super easy to rent out because there's always military members. And believe it or not, military members are one of the oddest people to rent to because the military pays you every month no matter what, but nobody wants to buy a house. And the reason being is because you transfer every 3 or 4 years, and nobody wants the commitment of having to buy a house then sell it when they move or anything like that. So FYI, if anybody wants to buy a rental property, near military bases is always usually a good chance unless that base gets closed for some reason. So because my renter is paid by the military, I got my rent pretty much consistently throughout the entire ordeal, so nothing bad really came from mine. In fact, anybody who keeps track of my other videos where I tell you about like my income and when I give you updates on everything, you'll notice that my property value is going up, my total mortgage is going down, and then I make money off the rent. But during the whole COVID-19, I had to be very careful about my savings to make sure I had enough money to cover in case anything happened. I didn't use a deferment. I've never used a deferment. So had I needed it, I could have used that. But so far I haven't needed to, and I hope I don't actually have to go into that little bag of tricks yet. So let's say you're a landlord and you need to do something. For whatever reason, you're losing money on property. A deferment's an easy way to go. It doesn't really harm you. In fact, I haven't done it, but I don't even think they ping your credit report for it. They just go by whether you're good with that mortgage with that bank that you've already done. If that doesn't work for you, or you're not in good standing, or for whatever reason you can't do a deferment, then refinancing is always a good option. I did think about doing that because it would lower my monthly payment. But I decided not to, just because I already have 8 years of equity in that house, maybe 7 or 8 years of equity in that house. So I don't want to restart it. But I did make a whole video about refinancing if you want to watch that. So this is something I really would hate to do myself, but you can always sell the property for a loss. Dude, it sucks, man. It sucks paying, selling your house and still owing 20, 30 grand to the bank for the next 30 years because you're trying to pay off the loss. But I'm a big fan of kind of cutting losses. And if there's nothing else you can do, maybe I would definitely try to do just about anything else than do that. In fact, I would sooner rent for a loss than sell for a loss. So for example, let's say you bought a house when the value was really high, you put a minimum down payment down, and it's $1,500 is your mortgage payment. But your average rent in the area is $1,200 for a similar place. Well, okay, that might suck. You rent it out for $1,200 and you're losing $300 a month. But depending on when you bought, your property value is probably increasing each month, so your equity is building each month. So as you pay down the mortgage, and as inflation hits each year, your $200, $300 loss should go down just a little bit each year. So if you can manage the loss for a little while, it'll be a very good long-term investment, or at least that's how I figured it. When I started running my place out in Jacksonville, I didn't think it would make me very much money, and it hasn't. But it's a long-term investment. It's an asset that I have, and if I run into major medical problems or whatever, I can always sell it or do multiple different things with it. So that's why I'm keeping it. And I really think that in a lot of cases, and again, non-expert, so take it for what it's worth, but I think in a lot of cases it's probably best if people try to retain any property you have for as long as possible. And if you do sell, make sure it's under favorable circumstances for you. Well, everybody, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed my little rant about being a landlord during the pandemic. And I hope none of you have a crappy landlord, but if you do, I'm sorry. And just please remember, most of us aren't like that. Most of us are just trying to protect our investment, but also we're trying to look out for our tenants, because if our tenants aren't happy, they're not going to sign the lease again. And the thing is that it is incredibly cheaper to keep a tenant in rather than putting a new tenant in there. That's even including if the cost of keeping you in there is to not raise the rental price for maybe that year. Because let's say I raised the rental price by $20. Well, that's cool and everything. I'll make $240 extra for the next year. But just having that unit empty for 1 month is going to cost me like $1,500. Not to mention that if you move out, I probably have to paint, I probably have to clean, and all these things cost hundreds of dollars. So I really hope you guys have good landlords, because a good tenant is incredibly hard to find, and good landlords seem like they're equally as challenging. Well, anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Give me a like, a share, subscribe, bell notification, whatever you want to do. Keep saving, be safe, and I'll see you later.